Okay, so now we're moving on to our podium discussion for today. As you can see listed below on the slide, we have the three participants, Christophe Forsinetti, Thomas Kern, and Nguyen. Christophe will be joining us from Cambodia, Thomas from here in Switzerland, and Duc from Vietnam. The topic of today's podium discussion is about innovation and startup investments, especially foreign direct investments. Basically, the question we'll pose is what can startups do to attract those international investors, how to overcome limitations in local investment policies. It's always a challenge, and investment always goes hand in hand with the legal structure and framework. So what is it, or how to best deal with that? I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Christophe, who's calling us from Cambodia. Christophe, hello, Christophe. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Christophe, I'll briefly introduce you to the audience. Founder and chairman of Obor Capital, a frontier markets venture capital firm, managing director of listed strategic hospitality, REIT. And also, you've previously set up and developed financial institutions in Southeast Southeast Asia. There we go. Africa and Latin America. So, Christophe, could you please tell the audience something about yourself, perhaps, and a success story? What are the projects you've worked on either now or in the past that worked out well?
Sure. So, which one? Well, basically, I would say that emerging markets and frontier markets have always been a kind of red line in everything I did. So it was really always about bringing access to finance to these countries, even though it's pretty challenging, and I think that's why it makes it very, very interesting. In all those countries, we know the legal environment is challenging. There is no ecosystem for investment. Banks are not lending. The PE firms are not here because of governance issues or size issues. So it's not easy, and even worse, the worst is really to bring capital markets, which can really be the driver of growth, to those countries. So I would say two projects I did within that scope. The first one was to develop the first motorcycle leasing company in Cambodia, and it was a Thai listed company, so with financing, and we were able to grow very fast because of that financing, providing leasing services so that people could access to loans or to leases to use their motorcycles. So we grew almost 1,000 people in 3 years, and opening 160 branches in Cambodia. Then we went to Laos, Myanmar, and Indonesia. The other one is the one I'm managing today, which is a REIT. So it's a hospitality REIT where we use the liquidity of the Thai stock exchange to actually buy properties in Vietnam, Indonesia. We've tried Cambodia, we're not able to. And to own those properties and give an exit to actually developers who otherwise could not actually could not develop because they wouldn't see their exit.
Okay, thank you very much, Christophe, for those preliminary insights. We'll be coming back to you in a few minutes. I'd like to move on to Duc, who is calling us from Vietnam. So good afternoon to you as well.
Good afternoon.
Briefly about him, CEO of investment management. Sorry, I'll back that up. Yeah. CEO of investment management. Let's see if I can get this straight. Chief risk officer, investment director, and strategic senior board member in different financial institutions, including startup, mergers and acquisitions, private equity, etc., and with more than 12 years of experience in banking, finance, and investment. So good morning, Duc. Could you also share perhaps? Yeah, good afternoon, exactly. So again, the time difference. Could you share something about your current professional interests and also a project or two that you're working on?
Okay, hi everybody. So the others joined this, I think, startup and innovation industry for 2.5 years. Before I am investor and investment banking servicing in big corporation company. So the first thing I think is quite hard for the investor here is to find high quality startup. So It's something that is related to Nepal and Kenya. That's the people like Ernest and Cam share. The quality of startup is not really high, like entrepreneurship and innovation model. So the angel is quite hard to find the startup. And the second is I think for the legal structure is not a big problem here, but for the foreigner. So when they come like from Canada or come from American or Australia, almost they will structure the deal through Singapore. They have more confidence when they have opened a mother company in Singapore, and they come back into the local company here. That we call the executive company. But for the local people, so we have about 3 or 4 kinds of investment. The first is angel investment, that through some platform that we own, like Innovation Capital Management. We have a online platform for the local investor to find the startup and go under the angels contract. And the second kind is under fund management. So Vietnam, we did have the innovation investment decree in 2018. So this is very new, and we can open the fund. It's not listing fund, but we can open together a fund limited to 30 investors and go with a fund manager to invest in the innovation company. And the third is the third point to share is yes, some startup that we have invest in our portfolio. For example, AI, IoT. This moment they are more successful compared with other startup in the portfolio, because they relate to digitizing, and they can have the business at this very difficult stage.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. The tech startups is something is also a recurrent theme over the last 2 or 3 days. A lot of people focusing on that area because of the infrastructure demands are a bit lower than other kinds of startups. So thank you very much, Duke. Moving on to Thomas Kern. Thomas, if you've been watching in the last 2, so good morning from Zurich, I believe. Is that correct, Thomas?
Yes, correct. Yes.
Very good. So if you've been watching, exactly. Okay. So if you've been watching the last 2 days of the conference, Thomas has been one of the judges of the startup pitches and is now going to be taking part in our podium discussion. So Thomas holds a master's degree in computer science from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology and also an executive MBA from St. Gallen. In 2003, he founded an independent company to provide advisory, business development, project management services to early stage and growth companies active in the high-tech sector by leveraging lean startup technology. So again, good morning, Thomas. Also to you, what are some of the, so you've been in the business for quite some time. What do you think, have you seen some success factors and success stories that you can share for the audience?
Okay, so in my daily work, I work on digital transformation programs for a large financial institution. And so my focus is in fintech and also blockchain and innovation in these domains. And I'm passionate about entrepreneurship. And when this whole fintech movement started back in 2015, I realized that it was difficult for startups in this area to get funded. And so I decided to launch an initiative to improve this. And now, over the last 4 years, in my free time, I have been helping build the largest business angel network in Switzerland, which grew from 30 to over 350 investors. And we did that with creating specific events to enable startups to pitch in front of investors. And this was a huge success and created huge momentum in the market and a lot of enthusiasm in the startup ecosystem also in Switzerland, but also abroad. And I think in terms of the podium topic, which is how to attract foreign direct investments. I think this is a good way to achieve that. If you build a local business angel network which is able to help early stage startups, that's kind of crucial from my perspective.
Okay, Thomas, thank you very much. I'll also be coming back to you in a few minutes. So if we could sort of open the discussion up, also we focus on success stories and factors, but also some of the biggest challenges when it comes to attracting those investments. So some of the problems perhaps or mistakes that you find that some startups have made in your experience. And Christophe, can I start off with you? I think you might still be muted, Christophe.
Yes, I was muted.
Okay.
I think one of the key challenge most of the time, you don't have investors and capital available in these countries. Well, there is, but mainly, you know, it's family related or it's local groups. And so I would say one thing that is very important is the governance you give to your project. And of course, when you're an entrepreneur and you're spending 15 hours a day trying to develop it and to sell and to manage your team. Honestly, organizing a board, having audited accounts, having the proper governance is very difficult and not. You might think it's not worthwhile. Actually, it is, because you realize only a couple of years later when you have some VCs or sophisticated investors coming, that's what they need. They cannot just trust you based on your personality and what people are saying about you. They need, they have a checklist. And I think it's very important for any entrepreneur in those countries to make sure they tick all the boxes of that checklist, even though it's not easy, even though it might be more expensive, because it's hard to find those human resources. And why would you, audit your company even though you're not making profit yet? So I think it's very important early enough to understand that you need to tick the boxes to be able to welcome capital, even if it's 2 years or 3 years later.
Excellent. Duke, your thoughts and comments on the same question?
Yeah, I think the first, I can share 3 points. So the first part is relating to the model. Yes, as I said, so almost young entrepreneur in the early stage, they cannot make a very sexy and very valuable business model. And I think what Ken has shared about the lean startup is very important for the entrepreneur to have very valuable idea and business model for all the emerging countries entrepreneurs. The second part is the finance management and the financial knowledge. So it's very hard to them for them when they start the business and they check every financial number. So for the investor, when they check with the startup, they don't have any ledge, they don't have any accountant number and traction. So it's very hard for us to evaluate them. And the third part is they really don't know and be familiar with the governance and the valuations and the term sheet. So that takes really long time for us to deal with them, about 3 or 4 months, even after we can find a model to invest in.
Okay, thank you very much. For those listening, if you're going back over the conference yesterday, there was a keynote address at the very end about valuation, something that might be worth reviewing in this context. So thank you very much, Duke. Thomas, would you like to add anything to your previous speakers or your own thoughts on the topic?
I second what Christophe said. So it's important to tick the boxes and to familiarize yourself with the process of investing. And there are a couple of good courses you can take, for example, like Venture Deals, which is regularly online, where you can understand how the process to raise capital and grow your business is working. And I think it's important also for startups to understand the other side of the table, the investors. How do they come to the decision of investing in a startup, and there are certain criteria which are used, such as business potential, product innovation, team potential, how is the go-to-market, what is the document quality, the pitch quality, which is very important to prepare for. And so there are some good advices, for example, on how to structure a pitch from Guy Kawasaki, which you can find online. There is also a number of initiatives where you can apply for pitching also internationally, which you can find, for example, on S6S or on GUST, which allow you to kind of engage and get the opportunity to pitch towards investors. I think it's also to practice the pitch by doing it is very important, so that you have a good impression. What is important though is that it's the first contact is to stimulate interest, and rather than explaining every aspect of your project. And what you have also to understand is it's a process over time. So investors meet you and look at you over a certain time. And what is important is that when you meet them a little bit later, half a year later or 3 months later, that you have kind of done what you were saying you would be doing. So these are a bit things which I take into the area of ticking the boxes, like Christophe said.
Okay, thank you very much, Thomas, also for the very practical tips that people can locate online. We're coming up on time, so I'd like to ask you to formulate perhaps one final statement for members in the audience who are considering investments and also startup side, looking at attracting investors. What do you think is the main piece of advice looking back over your experience that you'd like to share? Duke, can I start with you? Oh, sorry, okay. Christophe, go right ahead. Go right ahead if he's ready to
go. In my case, I would say frontier markets, emerging markets represent, they have a lot of challenges, mainly related to the environment, as I mentioned, but this should, and HR, human resources, but this should not prevent you from thinking big. Whether it's a small market, you should look at the neighboring countries that have a similar cultural environment. Whether it's a really underdeveloped market, it doesn't matter. There is always room to create something that can scale to a much bigger scale.
Okay, thank you very much, Christophe. I believe the term moonshot was mentioned someplace in one of the last 2 days, and I think you're heading in that direction too. Don't just think about local markets, but also other things that you can approach nearby. Duke, what about yourself?
I agree with Christophe about we start big thing with small steps. So we can understand that, and we just find out some very first point relating to the pitching, whether they have a very good team and the entrepreneur team. So almost the team, when they come with us, when they are just 1 or 2 person or 2 people, they cannot win the investor. They need to have a very good team that have very different point of view about the product, about the market, about the model, so that we can believe they can listen each other and can grow. So the first thing is the team, and the second is come back with the model. So is that lean? Is that correspond to the market needs, and that they can start something very small but niche to the market. So that the second point is an innovative model. And the third point that we normally find is if the team can have any competitive advantage compared with the other teams. For example, they have any IP in advance, and they can have any mentors, they have any incubators with them, and they can have any kind of the experience with some market that can help them to implement the product and the MVP quickly more than the others.
Okay, Wonderful. Thank you very much, Duke, for those final comments. And Thomas, how about yourself?
Well, I think it's important to start from the inside out. And I like very much a quote before, the mind is everything what you think you become, which was said before by our colleague in Nepal. I think it's important that you participate actively in the local startup ecosystem, which is available in the region. We heard this morning about Africa. We heard about other regions which have this kind of ecosystem starting, and also networks. It's important that you find mentors, investors, and that you start connecting with the global network to explore what's available. And for that, initiatives like the World Innovation Forum are great, of course.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, Duke Nguyen, Thomas Kern, and Christophe Forsinetti for participating in today's panel. Wish you a very enjoyable rest of the day, and hopefully you'll stay tuned for the rest of the conference. Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Yeah.